Not. Here we go. That's a good Memorial Day. Good morning. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim, Rambam, Hilchos Talmud Torah, chapters 5, 6, and 7. We are beginning with Perek Chamishi. Perek Chamishi speaks about the great mitzvah of honoring one's Rebbe. Perek Chamishi is based, at least in the beginning, in the Gemara of Krisus, Daf Koyach, and we will have 13 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Just like a person is commanded to honor one's father and to be in awe and to be in reverence of one's father, and the mitzvah of kibud rabbi and yiras rabbi, listen to these words, is yoser mi aviv, even more than one's obligation, one's mitzvah vis-a-vis his father. Why? Because aviv mevi'ei l'chaya olam haza. His father Taka brought him into this world. Rabbi here, as we will see, is referring to the person who taught one's majority of Torah. A student that learned from that rabbi, Roiv Toirasai or Roiv Chachmasai, Shalimdai Chachma, is Mevi'ai L'chaye Ha'olam Haba. Now, where do we find that it's even a greater mitzvah? Where is that expressed? For example, Ra Vedas Aviv Va'avedas Rabbi. Obviously, if you can save both lost articles, save both. But if you have to choose, or if you have a question, which one should go first, even if you can save both. So the din is Shal Rabbi Kedemis L'Shal Aviv. Another case, Rabbi Aviv and Rabbi Noisin B'Masa, they are both carrying loads. Maniach El Shel Rabbi. First, you have to relieve one's teacher's load, and then Shel Aviv. Now, just to add in between the lines a couple of nuances that are very important. If one's father's chachma is equal to the chachma of one's rabbi, then father comes first. That's very important. Another detail, Rabbi Aviv and Rabbi Shavuim, if both father and one's Rebbe were captured, they were kidnapped, and you have the great mitzvah of Pidyon Shavuyim, Poide es Rabbi v'acharkach Poide es Aviv. Here you have to redeem your teacher and only then your father. Another expression of this halach. However, unlike what we said before, where we said that if Rabbi and Aviv are equal, then the father comes first. Here, when they are taken in captives, their lives are in risk. There's a sakonas nefashos. Don't forget that Aviv brought him into this world. We're speaking about a physical life that's in risk. Remember, even if the father is not equal to Rabbi, because the life is in danger. Now v'chein goes to the case of Masa. The exception is Pidyon Shavuyim, where even if Aviv is not on the level, but by a load unburdening, we said, only if they're equal does father come first. V'chein im haya Aviv Talmud Chacham, afal pi she'einu shakol keneged Rabbi, meishiv avedasei v'achakach meishiv avedas Rabbi. I know we read the words that we read. The Hagos HaMaimenes makes it clear that this is a tos in the Girsa, that we have to read over here that if the father was a Talmud Chacham, shakul like Rabbi, only then are you going to be Meishiv Aveda to your father prior to Rabbi. But if he's not on the same level, then Rabbi will come first. Mamish, like by unburdening the load. That's a very important nuance. In other words, the only place where we say that if Aviv was a Chacham, even not on the level of Rabbi, Aviv comes first, that's by Pidyon Shavuyim, when there is a sakonas nefashos. Or let me word it just to simplify. If the father is sadly Bechlal not a Chacham, Rabbi comes first in all of the cases. That's just showing where we see that Kveid Rabbi is greater than Kveid Aviv. Ve'ein l'cha kavid gadol mechvayt harav, v'loi moedim ha'moedah ha'av. Amru chachamim, as the sages tell us, moedah rabach mamish k'moedah shamayim. It's equivalent to the fear of heaven. And therefore, lefika chamru, and look at the many expressions we're going to find here. Kol ha'choylek al rabbi, whoever disputes the authority of his teacher, we'll see soon an example of what that means, is mamish as if, God forbid, a person is revolting against the Shekhinah. And this is based on what we have in Parshas Pinchas. I know we're speaking about the rebellion of Korach, but the pasuk is from Pinchas, where it says, Bahat Soisam, they engaged in a controversy against who? Al Hashem. Now, who did Korach rebel against? Against Moshe. It's the same thing. V'chol ha'oisa meriva im rabbi. Ke'ilu is ka'oisa meriva im hashchina. Shenemba, when it's like it says by Chukas, Asherovu b'nei Yisrael es Hashem. Right? Here again, when there was a lack of water, who did they really quarrel with? With Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? But it says that they were ravu against God and vayikadesh bam. V'chol ha'misraim, whoever complains against one's teacher is as if one is complaining against God Almighty. Shenemar, as it says on Pasuk in Bashalach, that lo yolenu tilunoisechem ki al Hashem. And the final expression, v'chol ha'maraharer, whoever even thinks something not positive, right, on one's teacher, is ki'ilu maharer achar hashchina shenemar vayidaber ha'am beloikim uve Moshe, right, as it's written in Parshas Chukas. So you have choylek, meriva, misroyim, maharer. Wow. Now, choylek, disputing the authority. How does one express a dispute of the authority? Halacha beis, ezeu choylek al rabbi. I'm going to add one detail over here. Let's go back. That what zeu shekavei loy midrash. That's a student who establishes a house of study. V'yoshev v'doirish umalamed, and he sits there and he teaches Torah without the permission of his Rebbe when his Rebbe is still alive. That's called he's choylek al rabbi. Now v'af al pi she'rabbi b'medina acheres, even if the rabbi is in another city. Now, furthermore, even worse, a person, a student, may never render halachic rulings in one's teacher's presence to the point that here you're going to be chayiv misa. Halacha gimel, they're speaking again about being moira hayra, now giving a halachic ruling. If you're not b'mekoyim rabbi, what do you mean you're not b'mekoyim rabbi? You are 12 mil or more away, and someone, by chance, not a fixed, not a kavua thing, someone asked you, hey halacha, and you know the answer. Here, mutar lahashiv. Right? Ulahafrish min ha'isar. Now there's another exception where you can be moira hayra, even in front of your teacher, if someone right now was doing something prohibited. And for whatever reason, the rabbi did not say anything. Now you have to stand up for the honor of God. He said, for example, he sees a person who doesn't know, and that's why that person is doing something which is prohibited. Or, even worse, a person is a rasha, they know it's wrong, but they're doing it anyways. You should stop that person from that engagement, separate him from that sinful behavior by telling him davar ze asur. And that may be done afilu b'fnei rabbi. Why? Because of the rule, shekol makim sheyesh chilul Hashem. Here, God's name is being desecrated. Ein choylkin kavod lorav. Now, that what? That if you are berichuk yud beis mil, even though you didn't get to the shus from your Rebbe to render rulings, right? So you are shaloi b'makim harav. You are allowed to give up sagdin. That's only b'davar shenikra mikra. If it happened, one-time thing, an unusual occurrence. But for a person to establish himself to be a halachic ruler, in other words, to open up a beis din or a halachic hotline, and whoever wants can ask halachic questions. Afilu hu b'soifa olam, and v'rabbi b'soifa olam asur lo'lahoyros at sheyamus rabbi, only if your rabbi gave you rishus. Elim kein notal rishus mirabbi, which is the way the world works today. One of the things of receiving smicha, even though it's not real smicha, is that that's the way that your Rebbe is giving you rishus. Yoira, yoira, that's the nusach. You are allowed to give rulings. You are allowed to give a yadin yadin. It's to get to the shus. This is for halachic rulings. Now, v'chol mi shemeis rabbi, once a person's rebbe passed away, we're speaking all about the rabbi shelimdoi roiv chachmasoi mutar loy leishav lohoirois batoira ela imkein. One second. Ela the loy call me shemeis rabbi mutar loy leishav batoira. Don't think that after the rabbi passed away, so now you're not bifnei rabbi. No, here elam kein chaya Talmud shegia loyra. You have to be worthy of rendering such judgments. Halacha dalid. Any student who doesn't know enough, and therefore he's unable to, even if he's God-fearing, you have to know the halachas. Hadei's a shoita, that's a foolish person, that's a rasha, that's a wicked person, that's an arrogant person, gas ruach, and va'olav nemar, kirabim chalalim hipila. In other words, we are comparing a erroneous psak din to a miscarriage. But also in the reverse, that if someone is qualified and there's no prohibitions, it's not bifnei rabbi or the rabbi gave them permission, but because of their false humility, they're not rendering rulings. That's a person who's holding back the spread of Torah, and that's considered as if he's placing stumbling blocks before the blind, even though it's passive. He's not doing anything, but he could have helped people not make mistakes. And on him it says va'atzumim, mighty, and the drasha of atzumim means closing your eyes. That's the drush, that if you close your eyes, if you withhold, kol harugel. Elu hatalmidim aktanim shalei hirbu Torah karov v'hem avakshim lizgadlu v'fem haaretz. Ubein ansheyiram. And what do they do? Those people who give rulings when they're not yet qualified, they actually spread division. Because the real Jewish machloikas, what's real machloikas? In Torah, it's almost l'shem shamayim. So you say muter, that person says asad. You say kasha, that person says treif. And then you begin a big machloikas. And if one person was not qualified to give an opinion, that's a machloikas that was not necessary. They wreak havoc. They put out the fire, the candle of Torah, and they lose. They're machabelim, they're terrorists. And aleim amar shloime b'chachmasoi that echzulanu shualim ketalim. Small little foxes, means unqualified talmidim, are taking hold of us. And what are they doing? They are machabelim karamim. They are destroying the vineyard of the Torah. Halacha hey. But coming back to the Pedic, the topic is the kavod and the moira that we should express towards our rabbi, towards our teacher. Also, Talmud likreis l'rabbi b'shmai. A Talmud may not call his teacher by name, even if he's not in front of the teacher. We're going to see a big exception for this in a moment. In other words, like we just learned this in the previous second Hilchos Mamrim, many similar halachas when it comes to father. Right, like in Ksubas, when Rabbeinu HaKadosh was passing away, he made a statement, Shimon Beni, he was speaking about his son Shimon. His father's name was Shimon. I know his father wasn't there, but we'll see in a moment. We're speaking about a name that's an unusual name. May not be said by the Talmud. Here we're speaking about a Talmud. Now what about calling your teacher's name in front of him, not to him? So let's say the teacher's name is Yankel, and there's someone else there with the same name. So you can't call another person by the name of your teacher, even though you're calling the other person. And this is similar to the laws that we learned in Hilchos Mamrim regarding honoring one's father. So what should you do? If I have to call someone else, but that someone else has the same name of my teacher, and my teacher is there, Elishana Eshumam, change their name. Give them, Yankeleh. Do it in a way where you're not referring to your Rebbe. And that's true even la'achar moisam. Wow. Meaning, if they passed away, and it's bifnei rabbi. So I'm speaking about Yankel. My teacher's name is Yankel, so call him Yankel, even though, make sure that it's clear. Now, when do we say that what? That even shaloi bifnei rabbi, I can't say his name, for who sheyeh Hashem poloi. That is only when the teacher's name is unique. Everyone hearing the name will know that you're speaking about your teacher. Masha'inkein, if the teacher's name is a common name, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, such names, like we just mentioned from Rebbe, spoke about his son Shimon. His father's name was Shimon, but he was speaking about a son, and it's a usual name, that's okay.
There's no way this is after passing even of the Rebbe.
Well, first of all, we can go beyond the letter of the law. Hasidim are very careful never to say the name of the Rebbe. But since the Rebbe's name is a common name, so we will mention that name to other people. We're not going to change it because that's the din, which I can call my son by his name. It's a great example. When the Rebbe is not present.
Right.
Why can I call him by his name? Because it's a common name. Now, v'lo yitin shalom l'rabbi, and or yachzer lo shalom kederach shonosim l'reim amachzirim zelot zeh chavedim, when they greet each other. How do we greet each other? Shalom aleichem, shalom alecha. Not the way you greet your Rebbe. Now, if first of all bow down a little bit, shoicha lefanav, and v'oimer lo beyira v'kavod shalom alecha Rebbe, not shalom alecha stam. Now, what happens if you did not initiate, which you should have done? If the Rebbe initiated, so now that he initiated, just responding Shalom Aleichem Rebbe is also not enough. No, you have to compensate for the fact that you did not initiate. How do you compensate? You add the words Umayri. Ve'im nasan loy Rabbi Shalom, then Yachzer loy Shalom Aleichem Rebbe Umayri. How great is that? Halacha vav. Don't remove your tefillin in front of your Rebbe. It's disrespectful. Your head is covered. When you take off your tefillin, your head is uncovered even for a moment. Don't recline in front of the Rebbe. Now, other details. Don't daven lifnei Rabbi. Lifnei Rabbi would mean that you have your back towards the Rebbe. Means everyone is facing Yerushalayim. So if you're standing in front of him, that's the most disrespectful thing, to have your back towards the Rebbe. And not even v'loy la'achar Rabbi, not even behind one's Rebbe, right? Which means that you are standing behind him, facing him, but it's a stance in which it seems like there's some equivalence. Or not on the side. You understand? It means you can't stand directly in front of him, you can't stand directly behind him, you cannot stand directly on the side. When he's walking, don't walk like a buddy, walk by his side. Elo, you have to be back, but not directly back of him. You have to be further catching up, but not directly behind him. Not on the same level, further back, a little bit to the side, and then daven. Another thing, you may not enter the bathhouse with your Rebbe. You may never sit on the place of your Rebbe. Right, you should not side against your teacher's opinion in his presence. Right, directly to tell him, no, that you're saying wrong. Can't never do that. You may never sit down in front of him until he tells you sit down. You may not stand up, or until you ask for permission, may I stand? When you're departing from your teacher, don't say goodbye and then turn around, which would mean that as you're walking away, you're back. It's not as bad as davening in front of him, then you're standing with your back here. You don't put your back to him. Walk backwards, and therefore upanav keneged panav. Halacha zayin. V'chayv la'amid b'fnei Rabbi. You're obligated to stand up for your teacher. Misha yire'enu meirachayk. When you see him, how far meloy einov. In other words, the moment he's in your visual world, you can see him. Stand up. We're speaking about the Rabbi. Shlimoit mimenu reiv chachmasi. Until she is kasim mimenu. Until he's that far away. V'lo yira kaimasai. You can't see him standing. You can see a little dot somewhere. That's not Ka'ir see him. And then you can sit. Another din is v'chayiv adam lahakbil p'nei Rabbi beregel. A person is obligated to visit his teacher during Yom Tov. The Rambam makes no mention of Bisman Abayis or Be'eretz Yisrael. And indeed, that's the world we live in. That there's a big mitzvah. Let me use the words of the Rambam. There's a chiyuv for a person to go and spend Yom Tov with his Rebbe. Halacha ches. Ein chol can cover the Talmud b'fnei Rabbi. Elam Kain derech rabbi lachlik lekavod. In other words, if there's a Talmud that the teacher wanted for people to show him kavod, so then you are honoring your teacher by showing that student kavod because that's what the Rebbe wanted. Another din, v'chol hamalacha shu eved oisel rabbi. Any type of malacha, an eved is referring to an eved kanani, to a slave that would do for his master. So then Talmud oisel rabbi. For example, washing his feet. It's giving the manual tasks of servitude. Do that for your Rebbe. However, there's an exception that if you are in a place that people don't know who you are, it's very important for people to know who is a meyuches, who's not a meyuches, and if there is a rumor even that someone is an eved, it's very not good. So if you're going to do to your teacher like an eved kanani does for his master, another than an eved kanani, as we know, doesn't wear tefillin. So if you are with your Rebbe in a place that no one knows who you are, and you're not wearing your tefillin, and you are afraid that if people are going to see you washing your Rebbe's feet, people are going to look at you, what are they going to think? That du bist an Eved. So then you don't have to put on his shoes or help him take off his shoes and stuff like that. Now, if you're wearing your tefillin, then they're going to know that you're not an Eved Kanani, and you can do it. Furthermore, the Rambam doesn't say you can't. The Rambam says that if v'chosh, that means if you are afraid that people are going to suspect, a chassid from a Rebbe won't even think about that. He'll do whatever the Rebbe needs. Now, many times a Rebbe will be uncomfortable to have his Talmud to help him with the shoes. Like, let me be. So says the Rambam, a teacher that's preventing the student from serving him, is withholding from his Talmud kindness. And this link that Yirah Shamayim is connected to the Yirah of a Rebbe, something that, Ashreinu, Hasidim, we see it a lot. People that are not yet Hasidim, sometimes they are uncomfortable with that, but that's halach. In other words, Moira Rabach Komeira Shamayim. And it's all connected, that the more Yira a Yid will have for his Rebbe, that will give him more Yira Shamayim. Yeah, because God is going to give you a chesed because of that. Not only is he in violation of this great mitzvah of giving kavod harav, but goydem l'shchina shetastalik mi Yisrael. Wow. Halachates. What happens now that we have to have so much kavod and yira if no rabbi over al divrei Torah, and you can't contradict your Rebbe? So how do you word it to him so you don't tell him you're doing wrong? You give him honor. You tell him, Rebbe, you taught us. And you mention what the teacher taught you. Another din. When you're repeating a Torah in the presence of your teacher, that you heard from your teacher, you have to say, this is what the Rebbe taught us. You understand? People are going to assume if I'm saying something in front of my Rebbe, other onlookers will take it for granted that what I'm saying is the name of my Rebbe. Now, if my Rebbe didn't say it, who says he wants that to be attributed to him? I think there was a Chassam Sofer who had a very good liner. I forgot exactly. He said that if people are saying real Torah in his name, even though he didn't say it, he doesn't matter, as long as it's emes. But he didn't want for people to say their own Torah. Oh, he says, if you want to say my Torah in your name, gesundheit hate. I don't need to get credit, as long as what you're saying is Torah. But don't say your Torah in my name. In other words, so when you're saying a Dvar Torah and it wasn't from your teacher, maybe it's wrong, so at least saying B'Shem Oimroi, because it's clear it's not from the Rebbe. Another thing, Ukshayamas Rabbi, when once the Rebbe passes away, Kareya Kol Bigodav, he has to rent his garments the way one does for father and mother. In other words, as we're going to learn again in Hilchas Avel, not only the outer garment, but all of the garments, and not only one tefach, but achuhu megalas libay, and one may never do, right, the shoylol ma'acha, shoylol, yeah, the unprofessional sewing up you can do, but just like unique for father and mother, that you may never properly fix it, ve'ena ma'acha, as it is for a father.
It's only the clothes he's wearing?
Yeah, the clothes that you're wearing. Now, Bamet Varam Amurim, all of the halachas, Bamet Varam Amurim goes from halacha aleph. All of this level of reverence and respect, when we say Rabbi, is for Rabbi Muvak. What does it mean? Your outstanding Rebbe, Shalomad Mimenu Roiv Chachmasai. Avalam Loilam Mimenu Roiv Chachmasai. even though you learned, Harei Talmud Chaver, you are considered to be both a student and a colleague. You still have to give a lot of honor, but not on this level. But hold on. Still, Avol Oimid Milofanov, you have to stand up, as we'll see, not when he enters your vision. Not until when you can't see him anymore, but there's going to be a point where you have to stand up. V'koireya olav, and you'll have to rent one's garments. Kishem shukarei al kol hamesim, as if like we have to rip our garments for any yid that passed away. Shumasabel aleim, okay, he writes, for every Jew that you have to mourn for, you have to rent the garments. And that's afilu l'lamad mimenu elodavad echad. And that's even if that person you think is a cotton, bein gadol, oimed milufanav, and v'koireya olav. Halacha Yud. Kol Talmud Chacham shedei oisav mechuvanos. Any student, any Talmud Chacham who's conducting himself properly, will not speak in front of someone who has greater amount of wisdom, even though he didn't learn anything from him. No, that's a way of showing kavod. Halacha Yud Aleph. Harav hamuvak shenotz limchal al kavoidoi b'chol hadvarim ha'elu. Even though the Rambam wrote before in Allah Ches Kol Hamoineya Talmidoi Melisham Shoy Menem Emenu Chesed, that's on the Rebbe. But if he was Moichel Kavod, then Kavoidei Machel. L'chol Talmidei Oila Echad Mehem, whether it is to all of them or to one of them, to some of them, or Rishus B'Yadoi. However, V'afal Pisha Machal, still Chayev HaTalmid Lahadroi. Afilu b'shah shemachal, and the example would be to stand up in his presence. You have to give him some kavod. Halacha Yud Beis. Kishem shatalmidim chayavim b'chvaydo rav, kach harav tzorech lechabed es talmidov ulekarven. That's how we are concluding this halacha. The teacher has to be mechaber his students. And kach omru chachamim yihi kavod talmidecha chavev olecha, as dear as your own kavod. V'tzorech adam lizor b'talmidov. He has to be careful with their honor, and he has to love them. Shehem habanim hamhanin lo'olam hazeh u'lo'olam haba, because they are like one's sons that will bring him pleasure not only in this world and in the next world. Now the Rambam has a very moededik flip at the end of this Perek. Halacha Yud Gimel. Now it's going to make you think for a moment. Who's the Rebbe? Who's the Talmud? Says the Rambam. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hatalmidim moisifin chachma sorav. Students increase the wisdom of the teacher. Umarchiven, and they brought in his lev, his bina. The Adam Chachma, the Adam bina. Amru Chachamim harbe Chachma lamadati merabaisai. And even more from my Rabbaisai, I learned from my Chaverai. However, Umi Talmida Yosem Mikulam. And look at this example. Just like the fact is that a large log is not going to chop fire. The only way to light the large log is first you light the little log. Kach Talmud Katan Mechaded Orav, he sharpens his teacher. Through the questions of the Talmud, he brings out from the teacher Chachma Mifayara. So I'm asking, who's the teacher? If you say me Talmida Yosem Mikulam, but still, it doesn't mean that the student is a teacher, but maybe the Rambam is trying to tell you that included in why does a teacher have to honor his students, because he's also a teacher. Maybe that's also an expression of this Perek of Kavei Torav. Okay, Perek Shishi is now moving on to the kavod that we have to give to every Talmud Chacham. We're not speaking about the Rabbi. Not only not the Rabbi from whom you learned Roiv Chachmasei, not only Rabbi Muvak, not because he taught you anything. And this is a sugya we have in Kedushin. Perek Shishi has 14 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Kol Talmud Chacham. Mitzvah lahadroi. All right? Now, mahadroi, it literally means to glorify him, means to respect him. Afa pisha einoi rabbi. And this is based on a pasuk that we have in Kedoshim, Mipnei Seva Tokum. The taich of Seva means someone who has white hair. Stand up. Ve'hadarta pnei zaken. Now the second part of the pasuk of Ve'hadarta pnei zaken is zaken ze shekana chacham. Like we learned in the previous chapter, right, the Rabbi Muvak, the moment you can see him stand up here, for this person, Shekana Chachma, Mishayikrav Mimenu Ba'arba Amois, when he enters your 4 cubits, until he passes him. Because if he's behind you, even if he's in your Daladamas, you can sit down. Halacha Beis. Ein oimdim befanov, lebe beis hamerchatz, Why? Because since the Torah juxtaposes the words takum v'hadarta, right? Takum, really you put a comma. And v'hadarta p'nei zaken. But the Torah wrote them together. So we're darshan smuchen. Which means that the Torah puts them together to tell you that standing up has to be similar to where you're obligated to give respect. Meaning that in a place where there's no hidur, there's no respect, because in these locations, you don't have to stand up. Another din, ve'ein bali umanuais chayavam la'amad v'ntel chachamim. People that are craftspeople, right? You're working. You're in the middle of a chveis, you're a mechanic. You're in the middle of fixing someone's car. Imagine if every time a Talmud Chacham is going to walk by, you're going to stand up, you're going to sit down. There goes your work. You're going to have a loss of money. Again, here also we learn it because it says takum v'hadarta to tell you mahidur, showing of respect. Normally does not entail any financial investment. She'ein by chesron kis. So standing is only a chiyuv, only a mitzvah, and also she'ein by chesron kis. Now, being that you heard that every time a Talmud Chacham goes by, when you see him, you got to give him some amount of honor. So one solution would be not to look so much, not to see. So what happens if a Talmud Chacham is walking by, and you're going to make it as if you don't see him? In order for you not to have to stand up in front of him, you know what? No one will know that you really knew, and you're just making as if you don't see. But God knows. And that's why the Torah writes here in this pasuk, V'yareisam Elokecha, you should fear God. Anything that's dependent on what's going on inside of you, something that no human being knows other than God, that's when the Torah says, V'yareisam Elokecha. That's a good klal. You're learning Chumash, that means God says, listen, you can fake it, but not for me. Halacha Gimel. Now that you have to stand in front of every chacham, so a chacham has a responsibility to make an effort not to trouble the people. And certainly not on purpose. That what must a chacham do? Either go on the shortest path. Shortest path means you're going to inconvenience the least amount of people. And not only that, do it in a way, do it in a way that you're the most discreet, inconveniencing minimum. And now, going the smallest path is that if people will see you, so, inconvenience the least amount of people. Guys, don't forget, you only have to stand b'toich daladamas. There were people that felt that if they're going to take a long, roundabout way, no one will see them. Even better. He's not obligated to do it, but that's the good ethic, to make an effort, if possible, not to be matriach anyone. They would take long outer routes. Where they're walking through a neighborhood that no one knows them, not to trouble anyone. Halacha dalet. What if I see my Rebbe, I see a Talmud Chacham riding on an animal, I can't say he's not here. It's as if he's here. It's as if he's walking. And therefore, just like I have to stand up in front of a Talmud Chacham who's walking, I'm obligated to stand up in front of a Talmud Chacham, again, like we learned in Halacha Aleph, when he's in my Daladamas. Halacha 5. So the way to walk is the Rav should walk in the center. Gadol of the two students, the greater one, should walk towards the right of the Rav, and V'katan mismoiloi. Now let's not forget that if these two are walking with their Rebbe, we learned in the previous halacha that you're never allowed to walk on the side of your Rebbe, which is fine. So you would walk a little bit back, but that's the way to walk. So it's like a upside down segel. So the Rav is in the front, center, and a little bit behind to the right, and to the left is where the two Talmidim should walk. Halacha vav. Haroy chacham eino oimed mifanav ad sheyagia leila arba amas. And as we mentioned before, v'kivan she'avar, avar means he's behind you, even if he's within dalad amas but behind you, you can sit down. And the Rambam is repeating to make a contrast. That is by any Talmud Chacham. Now you have Bisman HaSanhedrin, so as we'll learn at the end of the Rambam, in Hilchos Sanhedrin, so you have the second to the top called the Av Beis Din, and the head of the Sanhedrin is called the Nasi. And here we're speaking again that they're not your teacher. If they are your teacher, then we learned that the dinim in the previous chapter. But even if they're not your teacher, it's not that all of the Chachamim are on the same level. Stam Chacham, as we just mentioned, Daladamis until he passes. You see the Av Beis Din Oimim Milofanov when Mishierenu Merachik Malay Einov. This is similar to Rabbi Muvik. But this similar to Rabbi Muvak. By Rabbi Muvak, you cannot sit down until he's out of your vision. You can't see him standing anymore. But by Ya'av Bezdin ve'ene Yoshev at sheyavra ma'achra v'arba amas. But after arba amas, you can already sit down. Now, more Sam Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, is coming by. Similar to the Av Bezdin Meloyenov. But ve'ene Yoshev at sheyeshev b'mekayma, you can only sit down either if the Nasi sat down, or until when you cannot see him at all. He's completely hidden from you. Just lahoyer, b'madayik, contrast this with the lashon of the previous Perek. It sounds like even more than your Rabbi Muvik. There it says you cannot see Maloi Kumase. You can see a dot. Here you can't. You should not be able to see him at all. And now, as we had regarding Rabbi here, v'hanasi shemachal al kavoidoi kavoidoi machal. Now, Kishanavi Nichnas, when the Navi is entering, the base medrash, everyone stands up. And they should not sit down. Kishav Bezdin Nichnas. Here, Oisim Loishtei Shurais, less respect, but still they make 2 rows. So he walks right in between the 2 rows. But since the 2 rows are standing up, what happens? It's like they're making a wall. So the people beyond the 2 rows, they can't see him. So everyone else can stay sitting. Halacha Zayin. Chacham shenichnas. Kol she'yagir lei ba'arba amas. What did we say? Only within dalad amas. Oimed milafanov. Echad oimed ve'echad yoshev. So what's going to happen? It's going to be like a wave. Because since you only have to stand up when he's within your dalad amas, so when you're walking through, so people are going to, you give a little stand up. Everyone is going to stand up, and then that bump, that wave is going to go until when he sits down, no one else will have to stand. Bnei Chachamim, v'talmidei Chachamim, bizman sheharabim tzricham lahem. There are certain students that are assets to their teacher, right? So you need for them to be there. So there's this whole sugya in the Gemara about can you walk over other people's heads? So if they're by the letter of the law, not midas chasidus, never to do it, like in 770, going over the benches. So if you're needed to be in your place because the Rebbe needs you there, then you can go that way. But ve'ein shevach latalmidei chachamim sheyikonsu la'achroina, and that will necessitate of them to walk other people's heads. Since the Rebbe needs you near him, go get there early. However, Yatza l'tzaydach, you got there early, but you needed to leave. If there was a need to leave, then you can go back, walking over other people's heads. But the Rambam is implying that if a Talmud left shaloi l'tzaydach, not for the need of the class, or they didn't have to relieve themselves, they left for their own business affairs, then they should not return to their place. Bnei Chachamim, bizman sheyesh bahem das l'shmoya. How should they position themselves? We're speaking about their sons. So if they can understand the class, they should face their fathers. If they don't have a capacity, they're very young, so where should they sit? It's beautiful. Not they don't come to the class. It's their father. So they are the ones that would sit behind the Rebbe, facing the people. Not with the backs, their face, but they're in other words, when you're learning and you're trying to understand, you got to see face to face. Since they're not understanding anyways, they should be the ones sitting behind their teacher, their father who's a teacher. Halacha ches. Now, Talmud shu yoshev lifnei rabbi. Talmud. What happens if a Talmud is sitting and learning the whole day in front of his Rebbe? What are we learning in this halacha, Yaakov? Every time you see a Rebbe come in and out, you got to stand up. Well, if you're learning in front of your teacher the whole day, he's going to be coming and going a couple of times. It's going to chop. You're going to be standing up in front of him a few times. That's also not correct, because we are mekabel oil malchus shemayim twice a day. So you can't give more kavod to the Rav the way you're giving to God. Ein reshoy la'amen b'fan of elo shachris ve'avos bilvat. Sholei kavoy demeruma mikvoy shemayim. Standing up is like a reverence. Kabbalah malchus shemayim, we do pamayim bayoyim. So everything we learned until now is because you saw them once. But if you're learning with them the whole time, then once in the morning and once at night. Halachates. Mishu zakein muflik bezikna. Someone who is very old. Even if that person is not a chacham, oimdim lefanav, you stand for the old man. The Rebbe is medayik. contrast halacha tes, gavalik, to the beginning of halacha aleph, halacha aleph begins with the words mitzvah lahadroi. The Rambam doesn't use the word mitzvah. Just to be medayik, that the Rambam says you're chayiv. It's not a mitzvah. Stand in front of the old man, but don't let the old man in you come out. That old man, don't let in b'chlal. It's a good thing to remember. The old man over there, for him to stay over, give him covet. Vafilu hachacham shu yeled oimed b'fnei hazoken hamuflik bezikno. You have to give honor. If someone is very old, how do you define that? I don't know. You got to stand up. I think very old means he's 30 years older than you, no matter how old you are. When you're 70, very old means 100. The stama. Okay, I'm just kidding.
It doesn't mean 70-year-old. It's another generation.
I know. Someone who's zaken muflik, I don't know how you define that. Okay.
It says over here 70 or 90.
Nachamol?
It says over here, two opinions, 70 or 90.
I'll go with the 90. You chalched by 54. I don't mind knocking it up to over 100 eichet. Okay. Okay. No, it's if the guy is not a chacham, you got to stand up moloi kumasai. You understand? But if you are a chacham, then you have to just you have to stand up a little bit. And this concept of giving kaveh to someone who's very old is not connected to being a yid. Afilu zaken goy mahadrin oisei b'dvarim. You give him respect, you help him walk, you give him a hand to support him. Shenamar, as it says, mepnei seva takum. Seva means white-haired. Kol seva b'mashma. Kol seva means not reyacha, not a yid, anyone. Halacha yud. Talmid chachamim einam yotzim ba'atzmam lasoisim kol hakol b'binyan v'chafira shel medina. A Talmud chacham is not allowed to take personal involvement in communal work. Why? Because if he's going to do manual labor in front of the masses, he'll become disgraced. In other words, everyone has an obligation to give them kavod. It's harder to give someone kavod if you see them doing manual labor. Another din, you don't collect money from them for the building of a wall, for the fixing of the gates, to pay security. Why, chavra? Because Torah is that which brings security. The whole city is protected from them, from their learning Torah, so there's a special din regarding them participating in security costs. And also, v'loi l'seshuras hamelach, part of security was to give a gift to the king. We're not going to use the word bribe, God forbid, we never bribe. Give a gift. All of these things were done so the king should afford us better security. Anything that's connected to security, a Talmud Chacham does not participate in because he's already doing it. Now there's another din. He's not obligated to pay taxes. Whether it's a collective task, whether it's a mashu kotzav al kol ish ve'ish. Every fruma yid is very medagdik in this. They consider themselves chachamim. They can't pay taxes. But this means don't pay taxes to the government. Shenemer, as it says in Oishaya, that gam ki yisnu bagoyim. Now yisnu literally means galus. God will place you amongst goyim. You know what the drasha here is? We appreciate these drashas. Yisnu means to learn Torah. That if you'll be learning Torah even while you are amongst the goyim, so koydem kol, Mashiach is about to come. Look at the lashon. Ata akaptzeim. I just want to make a little bit of a rearrangement to understand what we're doing. The word ata kaptzeim means God is saying that if you're going to learn, that means if we're going to remain observant in galus, God is going to redeem us. When? Now, or God forbid, ma'at, in a little while. Now, vi yochelu mimasa hamelech v'sorim. Even when you're still in galus, you're going to be released from all of the taxes. It's amazing, huh? What's it called over here? In the law over here that the rabbi parsonage, the concept of in other words, the concept that you have in the world that people of clergy are exempt by dina de malchusa from any taxes. That's halacha yud. Some people are mahadir in it. V'chein chasidim and lefnim yishirus adin. V'chein mo yischayda leTalmud Chacham. If a Talmud Chacham is doing business, he has merchandise to sell. So the way you are machabed is manichin oisei limkar tchila. First, allow him to sell the stuff first. Ve'ein manichin echad mibnei hashuk limkar at sheyimkarhu. In other words, he's going to sell his merchandise first because afterwards he's going to go back to his learning. V'chein din. If he has to go to a din Torah and other people are there, we're going to take his case first. Number one, and another din. And these dinim we're going to learn at the end of the cycle in Hilchos Sanhedrin, that even though ideally, the litigant should stand, but that's not engraved in stone, so you're machabed him by telling him to sit down, but then right away, as we're going to learn later, not to make the other one feel, ooh, he's being honored, and not me, we're going to tell the other litigant to sit down also. But the reason why they were told to sit down, the Moishiv and Oisa, is to give him a kavod. Yud Aleph. Avein Gadol who lives Oisas HaChachamim, or even worse, or to hate them. And Loicharva Yerushalayim, this is referring to Bayis Rishon. Achabazu Ba Talmid HaChachamim. Shneimar, as it says, Vayihiyu Mal'ivin B'malachei Elokim, and they would mock the messengers of God. Uboizes in the Vadav, and they would despise his words. Umetatim b'neviyav, and they would scoff at his prophets. Koloimer boizim alamdei devarav. V'chein zeh shomarnu b'Torah in Parshas B'chukoisai that v'im b'chukoisai timo asu, if you will despise my chukim, what does it mean? Not you'll despise the mitzvahs, you're going to despise the people who teach my mitzvahs. Malamdei chukoisai timo asu. V'cholam avazas hachachamim ein loy chelek lo'olam haba, and that's included in the words of someone who is scorning the words of God. Ki dvar Hashem bazo. Halacha Yud Beis. Afal pi sham avazes chachamim ein lechelek olam haba. Imbo edim shebizo afilu b'dvarim. If you have witnesses that someone scoffed, made fun of, embarrassed, even only verbally, many times we say there's already a punishment. Chayiv, right? He's ein lechelek olam haba. There's another obligation. Chayiv nidui. There's an obligation to put that person under a ban. Now, the whole next chapter will speak all about the details of how it's done, what does it mean, the levels of a ban. And even though, as we're going to see at the end of this chapter, that there are 24 activities for which someone should be put into a ban, it's written in Hilchos Talmud Torah because the sugya, as we learned in Moed Katan, is connected first to Hamavas al Talmidei Chachamim. Guys, it's not a nun, and whoever's learning the Chayenu, it's a mem, a shlos mem. So here's the chaim. He's going to be put in a nidui, and on top of that, he's going to be fined. A litra is 35 golden dinarim, and that knas is no matter where, Eretz Yisrael, b'chutz la'aretz, and that money is given to the chacham. Even after the passing of the chacham, still this din of being put into nidui, menadin oisay based in. But the hematir noisik sheyachzer b'tshuva. Avolim hoya chacham chai. It's not enough to do tshuva. If the chacham is chai, you have to go and apologize. Ein matir noisay ad sheyiratz eloi ze shenidu b'shviloi. V'chein hechacham atzmai is allowed menada lechvoidei la'am haaretz shehifkir boi. In other words, if someone acted outragingly against a chacham, the chacham has the right to put him into a nidui. And we'll see at the end of the next chapter, I'll think that Chachamim didn't do it, but they have the right to do it. Because he knows it was done. So then, boy shloisha umatin loy. Now, ve'im ratza chacham limchaloi v'loy nido. So then, harashus biyadoi. And you should just know there's nuance in that, because if the chacham was disgraced in public, then it's not always correct for the chacham to be moichel. Then it's no longer about him. Halacha Yud Gimel. Harav shenido lechvoidoi. So who is bound? The Rambam didn't say yet what consequence does a nidui cause. That will be next chapter. We're getting there. But the question is, who is bound by it? So I'll say it by heart. If the greater person made a nidui, more people are bound. If it's coming from a lower level, then less people are bound, as the Rambam will describe. Everyone has to behave with him because of the nidui, which will, again, next chapter. But if a Talmud puts someone in a ban, so then the Rebbe the Rebbe is not bound by that nidui. However, so how was it effective? Other people. Let's broaden this. If the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, puts someone into a nidui, then menuda l'chol Yisrael. If someone is even menuda l'chol Yisrael, it doesn't bind the Nasi. Similarly, menuda le'irai, this ear versus the next ear. So if we live in the city and this city put him into a ban, so everyone here has to keep it, but everyone here and everyone in the other cities, because he lives here. They are like the Talmidim. But if someone who lives here was put into a nidui over there, they're like the Talmud, we're like the Rav. All of this we have in Masechtas Moed Katan and the final Halacha Yudalet. That we're lenient, right? What was the leniency? That not everyone is bound by the nidui. All of these leniencies is only if someone was put into a nidui because they were mavaza, they acted disrespectfully, even only verbally, against the Talmud Chacham. But as we'll see in a moment, there are many halachic reasons that justify someone being put in a nidui. We're going to enumerate them. Even if the one that put him in a nidui was a katan, because that person did something against God, you understand? So here we don't say, who put him in a nidui, the Rav or the Talmud, then chayiv even the nasi v'chol Yisrael leaning by nidui. You have to appreciate that. No, it's all of the others is doing something that God said not to do. Here, I know that God said not to be mevazah Talmud Chacham, but here you affronted a Talmud Chacham. So it depends who you affronted. The other ones, everyone has to keep it. And not only does it have to be tshuva, which is not enough in itself, there has to be the formal releasing of that nidui. Now, says Rambam, al esrim v'abar devarim and adam eso adam. This type of ban, again, we'll speak about details in next chapter, is to be imposed on a person for the following 24 violations. And this ban could be placed both on a man or on a woman. Ve'elohein aleph hamevazes hachacham afilu la'achar moisei. That's why this is an Hilchos Talmud Torah, because of aleph. Now,
the way he gets out of it is tshuva, he said.
On
this one, the way he gets out of it
is by doing tshuva and asking for forgiveness if the chacham is alive.
You have to go to the kever.
So that's something that Hasidim do. Halacha beis hamavaza shliach bezdin, which can happen. Don't shoot the messenger. That's the nature. If you do that, you can be put into a ban. Hakoyda lachaverei eved dalit any chaverei misha sholcholei bezdin v'kovolei zman. Not the first time, but we'll see after 3 times. He's not going into the details. If you don't respond to a summons by a bezdin, and you're not coming. 5. Hamazalzel b'dover echem medivrei soifrim. Mezalzel means you treat something completely disrespectful. We have in the Gemara the story. Someone was mezalzel by Netilas Yadayim. Shlomo HaMelech made the takana. It's really for Kehanim. Chdaf nishtal Netilas Yadayim. You're mezalzel in it. If you become mezalzel in divrei Torah, it's a certain type of not listening to the law, not breaking any law. We have a yetzer hara that's different. You're mezalzel in it. Halacha vav. Mishlei kibul olav asadin. It's similar. Not coming to court justifies need. A person can come to court, sit there, say ishkoyach, thank you. Doesn't care. Halacha zayin. Misheyesh b'reshusei davar hamazik. If you own something that causes damage, like a kelev ra, or a rickety ladder. Imenadin oisoi achi yosen hezekoi. Wow. Halacha ches. Hamoicher karka shaloi lo'ovdei kechavim. Menadin oisoi achi yekabel olav kol oines. Sheyovim in oived kechavim liyisrael chavere balametzar. So here we're speaking about someone, guys, important, who did not sell his property as he should have to the neighbor. So there's a din of a bal metzra. Means if I own property, now obviously if the other person paid more money, I'm allowed to do that. We're speaking about the scenario where the neighbor would have paid me the same amount of money as to the person who I sold it to. And on top of that, I sold it to an Oved Kirchavim who might harm me. Then that person has to accept that if he'll undergo any damage because of his bad choice, he's going to pay for that until he accepts that. Halacha tes. Hameid al Yisrael bar kosh lev de kechavim. If a person goes to court, to a non-Jewish court, and through his testimony, money was exchanged, shaloi kedin Yisrael. Menadin oisiachi yishalem. It's a very big nasayin because people tragically are very mezalzel in this now, and you're subpoenaed. I don't know how to get out of a subpoena. Figure out, get a good lawyer, go to Shuki. But don't go to court. If it's not about safety and security, we're not allowed to go to our kois. And there come certain lines, you're put into a chedim. Halacha yud. Tabach koyin. If you have the tabach wasn't only the slaughterer there, it was the butcher. You owned the animal, you slaughtered it, and there was a chiyuv to give from an animal. I know that we paskin like Rabbi Loi, only Beretz Yisrael, but when there's a chiyuv to give the gifts The matanis, zroya l'choyayim in the cave to the kohen. So if someone is tabach kohen, so he thinks, I'm a kohen anyways. Why do I have to give the gifts? I'm just keeping it. No, you have to separate it and give it to another kohen. Wow. Halacha Yud Aleph, hamachalol yom tov sheni shel galuyos, which is something that people do because say it's only a minik. By the way, which one is not a minik? Shavuos. The yom tov sheni of Shavuos is much stronger than any other yom tov sheni, because the whole reason of that they had a doubt never existed for Shavuos. By Shavuos, no one had a doubt. You counted the 49 days and you made yom tov on the 50th day. The only reason why, so why do we keep a chalal 2 days of yom tov and Shavuos? Like plug. But there was like now, it used to be a doubt. Now it became a minik. It was never a doubt. It was an enactment from the outset. But even if it's a Pesach or Sukkos, people can be mavaza in it. Halacha Yud Beis. Ha'oisem halacha bet of Pesach achar Chatzos. Lifnei Chatzos. What did we learn in Mesechtas Pesachim? Depends on the minik. It depends on the minik. But after Chatzos, it's a takonas chachamim. Halacha Yud Gimel. The case 13. Hamaske Shem Shemayim levatala. Oy l'shvur b'divrei havoy. He takes an oath casually. Yudalid hamevi esorabim l'deichil al Hashem. If you remember the story when Choyna Hama'agel, the great Choyna Hama'agel, when he made that circle and he made a declaration that I'm not leaving the circle until God will listen to the prayers of the children, Shimon ben Shatach says that Ilmale Choyna Yata, you should have been put into a ban, because if there wouldn't have been the Nes, it would have been a Chil al Hashem. Tezvav, hamevi esorabim l'deichil kacham achutz. Somehow you made other people to eat kacham achutz. Tezayin hamachashiv shanu v'kavei chadosh mechutz la'aretz. You made the Jewish calendar in chutz la'aretz, and the guys ki mitzion teitzei Torah. Yud Zayin Yadav was looking at the watch. Hamachshel esu iver, big machloikas. The Minchas Chinuch has this big debate. Do we say, guys, that this is only in the context of what we're learning right now, which is that you caused another Jew to violate the Torah? Do we take this pasuk literally? What happens if I actually put a stone in front of the blind and he stumbles? So there's a machloikas whether that's included in the sin or not. People are medayik from the fact that the Ravid over here says that Omer Avram could go in hamake b'nai hagadol and he might hit you back. So how is he arguing with the Rambam? Because people understand that the Rambam, who doesn't define this, is any type of mirshal, even the pshat. Ein mikri yotzim midei pshut. Halacha case Yudches, hama'akev harabim elasis mitzvah. You prevent people from doing a mitzvah. Yutes tabach sheyatza treifa mitachas yodai. Yatza treifa means not by accident. A tabach that sold non-kosher meat knowingly. Chav tabach shalei batek sakina lefnei chacham. As we're going to learn, you have to give your sakin to the chacham that he should check it. 21 hamaksha atzmi ladas, a person who intentionally causes himself to have an erection. Chav beis mishagedish es ishtoi. Person divorces his wife, and then he has business dealings with her, whether it is a partnership or whether it is other business dealings, which will mean that they're going to constantly interact. Guys, I want you to know something, big kids, and I know it's late. If a man divorces his wife and they have yichud after the get, he has to give her another get, because since they are so familiar with each other, them interacting could very likely lead them to having a relation. And based on the rule that Ein Adam Oisa B'Yosef B'Yaznus, it was done with the kavan of Kiddushin. Telling you din, it's crazy. In no cases that there was a second get given, because they had the yichud together. So after a person divorces his wife, he has to set up a system where he has the least to do with her. And if he doesn't do that, they put him into a ban. Chav Gimel Chacham Sheshmuah Seiraf. A Chacham has a bad reputation. So there's dinim about that. I know people can lie, but if there's a bad rumor, you have to counter it. So there's Shmuah, there's all these dinim about if there's a bad rumor on someone, if there's smoke, there's fire. And Chavdalid, Hamanade, She'ena Chayiv Nidoi. If someone places another in a ban, and he was not allowed to do that, he should be paid. Now, I want to say like this before we go on to the next Pedic. You know who's not mentioned here? We're going to learn in the next chapter. Others have to keep the ban. Like they can't have certain interactions with him. If the others break the ban, they're not put into a ban automatically. Okay, Chavre, let's go now on the final chapter of today, Pedic Shvichav. This is all Moed Katan. We have 13 halachas. This is Pasha to understand all the dinim about the ban. How was it done? How was it undone? And we're going to see really that there's two types of bans with many other pratim. Halacha Aleph Chacham, Zakein B'Chachma. Or Nasi, wow, the head of the Sanhedrin. Or the Av Bezdin, Shesarach, that God forbid, tzarech means they stink, they're sinning. So says that Rambam, ein menadin oise befaresya li'olam. In private, yes. You don't make a public ban on them, only if they are behaving like Yeravim ben Avat, which means that not only are they sinning, but they're causing others to sin. And by the way, that's one of the reasons we had in the Chav Daled reasons to put a person in a ban. Then you make it even befaresya. Avol keshachat shar chatois. Right. They don't. So we'll see in a moment. Now that we're speaking about a certain type of not publicizing the punishment, that Rambam is extending it for a moment for other sins for which you're not chayv nidui. This line is, if a person did other sins for which they're not chayv nidui, but you know what? They're chayv malchus. So the same concept, you don't give them malchus in public. Malchus, you give them malchus, but bitzina, in private. Shneimar, as it says, that the chashalta hayoim, the chashalta gam novi im chalayla. So what's the drasha? Afal pisha kashal. Even if someone stumbled, you punish him, but hidden. Kaseu kalayla. Now the Rambam now is going back to the beginning. The Chacham, the Nasi, did something for which they're chayv to be put in a ban. So you don't do it befaresya. So what do you do? For oimnum loy, he chabed v'shei b'veisecha. Preserve your honor and stay home. Because as we're going to see in a moment, a nida really means that other people should not interact with him. Problem is that if you're not doing it befaresya, how will other people know? Other people won't know. So you tell this person, have enough dignity, stay at home. So b'derech mamela, everyone will be separated from you. Chol Talmud Chacham shenis chayv nidui. The Talmud Chacham is chayv in a nidui. Asur lebezdin likpoitz v'lenadoyse b'meheira. You have to be careful not to jump and to ban him. Elaborchem idavazev v'neshmatim imenu. Try to avoid the matter. No, it's as even in the previous chapter, it's a certain attitude. Be very cautious. They praised themselves. They were proud of the fact. They never participated in banning another Talmud Chacham. And as we know the story of the Alter Rebbe Mitagra, and the Alter Rebbe was paid a price with his chaverim. He did not want to participate in the ban, which was really a counter ban. Don't put other people in a chedem. Even people that would give malchus to another Talmud Chacham in private. Malchus, in private. Ban, they really avoided doing that. And avafilu makas mardus, that they were nimdim lahakoisai, they didn't say it's only makas medrabanan. That they gave, but nidoi not. Halacha base. Now, finally, the case of nidoi. How is a ban issued? Omer, we say this is how it's done. Ploini yehi b'shamta, mentioning that Ploini's name. If that person is present, you began by saying Ploini. Ploini means his name, and then you said zeh. They didn't say you are placed in ban. You mentioned the person's name. And if he's present, then you say you b'shamta. Now the Rambam introduces that there are really two types of bans. One is called a nidui, and one is called a chedem. The Rambam uses the word shamta as a generic word. People are familiar, there are three words, right? There's shamta, nidui, and chedem. So when you put the person in a nidui, you use the words, this person is bishamta. But there are two levels of bans. Nidui is the less severe. Chedem is the more severe. Then we don't say the word shamta. Shamta is connected to nidui. I correct myself. Shamta, nidui is the same. Now the Rambam says that whenever you read in the Torah the word arur, arur is the generic word. Arur can mean many things. Arur refers to someone, boy Allah. Right? Whenever there is a curse, we can use the word arur. Whenever an oath is being used, a lashon for an oath is Allah. Whenever a nidui is being used, we can have the words arur. It's very important that. So here we go. So arur is a generic word. Doesn't always mean a curse. Good. Gimel. Kate said, matirin hanidui chedem. Even though we didn't say what it means, what's the consequence? But now that we established that there's nidui less severe, chedem more severe, how do you undo the nidui? How do you undo the chedem? Just like it was placed verbally, it's removed, released verbally. What are the words? Sharui lach umacholach. Just to appreciate the words that we use, let's say Erev Rosh Hashanah. And if the person is not present, so you can't say the words lach, oimer loy, ploini sharu loy, umacholoi. I just want to make a contrast. The Chapat Rambam is saying that if he's present, you don't have to mention his name. When you put the person in a chedem, even befanav, you don't say zeh b'shamta. You say ploini, kama zeh b'shamta. When you're releasing it, you say sharulach. Thank God. Imagine every time you do a hataras nadarim at Rosh Hashanah, now we have 10 people that have to add his name. Like this, segate, you go quicker. But if it's shalai b'fanav, then you have to mention his name. Then you say ploini shadul loy umacholoi. Halacha dalet. Okay, what are the practices? What does the nidui imply? Menuda, person who is in the ban, even the lower level, asur l'sapid, he may not take a haircut, he may not launder his clothing like an oval during the time of the nidui. The aim is he may not be included in a zimun of benching. He's not part of a minyan. And aside of you not counting him, but even if he comes to shul, everyone has to stay away from his daladamas. However, you can interact with him from the distance. He can teach others, as long as the others stay away from his 6 feet. You can teach him. He may be hired and he may hire others. Now, if the person dies while still in a ben, Bezdin, Sholchin, they send someone and they're going to place an Evan on his Aroin. It's interesting, Lahoyer, that putting a stone on the Aron is a sign a person is in ben. But Tzad there's a minute by us when we go to a Beis HaChaim, we place a stone on the Matzeva. Okay. And that's a positive thing, obviously. Now, Allah, that's needed. What about a chedim? Yoised all of hamacharam. She'eina shoyna lachedim. He may not teach others. Others may not teach him. But one thing can never be taken away from him. He has to learn. In other words, when you're reviewing, the Rambam is saying something gavaldik. When you're learning by yourself, you're not going to increase that much chachma. There's no pilpul talmidim. At least you're not going to forget. That you're going to get. He may not be hired, he may not hire others. You cannot engage in trade with him. It
doesn't say that he has to learn because he has a mitzvah of Talmud Torah.
Doesn't say that he has to learn because, his Talmud Torah would mean at least to retain and not to acquire new. In other words, you can't really, it's not able to because you don't have other chevra. Halacha vav. Now, what did we learn in the last chapter, guys? Nothing about a chedim, unless there is an exception. The chav dalad dvarim is to put a person in a nidui. But listen to what happens automatically. If someone was put in a ban, and he's there for 30 days, and he did not seek resolution to have the ban removed, so there's the beginning of the next 30 days, he's put into a nidui, not a severe one, but it's repeated. But if Yashav Shloishim Yom Achedim v'loy bikesh latiroi, it's already 60 days, now machrim and oisoy. Halacha Zayin, bekama matirin hanidui oy hachedim. How many people are needed? Says Rambam, b'shloisha afilu hadyoitis. Now, we're speaking about the reason for the nidui was removed. Even though the reason was removed, it's not automatically nullified. But since the reason is not there, even 3 adyoitis are enough. Ideally, as we'll see, the one who placed them in the ban should be the one removing it. Here we're speaking about where it's not possible. The yachid mumcha matara nidoi o yachedim levadoi. Okay, now the Rambam adds, v'yesh l'talmud lahater hanidoi. Even a student can take away a nidoi or the chedim, even b'makim horav. And it's nice, we're learning 3 P'rakam Rambam. No, we learned you can be made a halach. Well, another thing, when it comes to be hataras nedarim, I want you to know, hataras nedarim, a Talmud may not be matir b'makim rabbi. But here it's not about hataras nedarim. Here we're taking away a nidui or a chedim, so we're more lenient. Now what's famous in this Perek Chavre, if you'll realize, we finished learning halacha Zayin. What comes after Zayin, Yaakov? Ches. What's in our Rambam? Tes. So there's a big to-do about what happened to halacha ches. Now, we mentioned in the beginning that there's 13 halachas. So, Lamashal, people are learning the Rambam La'am, which is awesome. The Rambam La'am writes that the Rambam purposefully skipped ches, since it's the chapter about chedim. Chedim is not a good thing, so he's like removing the chedim by removing halacha ches. The Rebbe somewhere wrote, the Rebbe didn't comment on what the Rambam La'am writes. The Rebbe writes, he found other sources that halacha aleph was actually, what we have as aleph is aleph and beis. And the beis begins, v'chein kol Talmud chacham sheneschayv nidui, etc. And therefore, no, that really we were already up to ches, and now let's go on to test. Shloisha shenidu v'yachol. It's implicit in the Rambam that the same ones that put someone into a chedim should be the ones removing it. The same ones who put it in a nidui should be, but if they're not here, as long as the reason for the nidui is no longer here, you don't need to have the same three. If they're not there, and as we just mentioned, you want to have, right, let's go to the first one. A person was mavazal Talmud Chacham. They forgot whom, so they can't even go and apologize. So you go to the Nasi, you apologize to the Nasi on behalf of all of the Chachamim, and he'll take away your ban. That's Pshat. Halacha Yud Aleph. Nidui al Tanai. Guys, you know where you have a Nidui al Tanai? You remember the story of Yehuda, right? We learned this in the Gemara. Yehuda told his father that if I will not bring back Binyamin, v'chatasi la'avi kol hayamin. So the Gemara says in Makis that during the 40 years, all of the Shvatim's bones were taken to be buried in the Holy Land. But it says concerning the Atzmois of Yosef, they were misgalgalin, they were moving around in the Aron. Why? Because he made a nidui, even though the condition was he brought Binyamin. Nidui al Tanai afilu al pi atzmai. Even if the conditions were met, if those words were said, you have to release it. By Yehuda, it wasn't released, there was a consequence. Talmud Chacham shenida atzmai. Talmud Chacham put himself in a nidui. Afilu nida al atzmai al das ploini. Like he says that nidui, if that person does such and such thing, and that person did it, so really there was another person involved in his ban. Since he made it, he can remove it. Yehuda could have been made for it, just he didn't. Halacha Yud Beis. Mishanidu b'chaloim. Guys, sometimes in halacha we say divrei chaloimois loy mailan v'loy meridin. Not always. Here, if someone dreamt that in their dream they were placed in a nidui, it's even more serious than being placed in a nidui by a beis din. And therefore, until now, what did we learn? That a yachid mumcha can be matar a nidui. If you don't have a yachid mumcha, says the Rambam, 3 hadyotis. For a dream, not enough 3 hadyotis. Afilu yada mini dohu. So you can say, if I know who put me in the ban in my dream, let me go to that person when they're alive, if they're alive, and ask them to not good. Who are these 10 people? Ideally, sheshoinen halachas. People that are proficient in the halacha part of Torah. Now, if you don't find 10 people right here, you got to go get them. Then you can get 10 people, even though they're not on the level of knowing halacha, as long as they know Mishnah. If you don't find that even the 10 people that know Mishnah, people that know how to read the Chumash. If you don't even have that, then what do we say at Erev Rosh Hashanah? Mumchin. That's why we say the words mumchin. If they're not mumchin, read it bitmiyah. Then matin lo yafilu shloisha. Final halacha yud gimel. Mi shenidihu b'fanav. Ein matin lo ela b'fanav. In other words, if Chaim was put on a ban, that Ran explains, if the Beis Din is going to release Chaim without Chaim's knowledge, and other people might know, but Chaim won't know, he's going to be choshid that the other people are not keeping the ban. That's the pshat that Ran says. Nidu shaloi b'fanav, but if the ban was not placed in front of him, then you can release it. Afilu shaloi b'fanav. B'fanav afilu. You don't go that far. Ve'ein bein nidu la'afara klum. There doesn't need to be, now that you are in ban, you got to at least be in the ban for one day. No. you can put someone in a nidui, and if the reason goes away, you can right away release the person. There's no minimum time, there's no maximum time. Furthermore, we learned before that normally nidui, then 30 days later, vaitin nidui, and then chedem. If Beis Din says we want to lachatchila put him into the chedem, and go more than that, say not only are we putting you in chedem, but we're going to say that anyone who doesn't abide by it will also be put in chedem. That's not one of the chavdala dvarim. Right away will also be put on the chedem. They have the right to do so. Machrimim kedei leyasrei yagla Torah ad shelo yifritzu achoitim. Afal now the Rambam says sheyesh reshus lechacham lenadis lechvoidoi. Your chacham can place someone under a ban to preserve his own honor. Einoi shevach letalmud chacham lahanig atzmim b'davar zeh. You disgraced me. I'm going to place you in a ban. Ela mailin oznav medivrei ha'aretz. Turn your ears away from the words of this Ha'aretz. V'lo yosis libay lahem. Don't pay attention. Kinyan she'amar shleima b'chachmasei gam l'chol advarim asher yidabru al titein libecha. V'chein ho'yodarach chasidim arashonim. That shoymim cherpasam, even if they would hear their shame, they would not answer. V'lo yoid, not only would they not answer, but shemoichelim l'macharev v'seichel, they would forgive. The Gemara says in Megillah, right, Nechunya ben Akana, before they would go, he would go to sleep. He would declare that Haneni, Moichel v'Shaleach v'chulei, and the Alter Rebbe put that nusach into Kriyash Mashalamita. One of the things that they would take pride in is by saying, Shema Oilam le'nidui Adam. They never put a person in a nidui. They certainly did not put a person in a chedem if it was for their honor. V'zohi darkam shel Talmidei Chachamim shero leilech ba. So we go from Chasidim Arishayim, right, who forgave. That's the hardest. They forgave. At least don't put a person in a ban. That's a Talmud Chacham. If they were ashamed in private, then it's virtuous for them to be forgiving. But if someone was ashamed in public, that's not about them anymore. He's not allowed to be forgiving. And if he forgives, he's going to be punished because this is disrespect to the Torah. Narvas then, Elanoikim, the Noiter. So when we learned on Shabbos, right? So we mentioned it's for physical things that there's no Nakam in the Torah, for the hatchet, for the house. But for this, be Noikim and be Noiter. How? Like a snake. Just to conclude, that Rebbe says Gavaldik. Watch out, like a snake. A snake eats afar. He doesn't enjoy it. It's dust. So when he's doing it, he should do it because it's a mitzvah to do it, not because he's enjoying it. That's the pshat gavaldik hanachish. Achi yivakish v'menu mechila, and then v'yislach loy. And with this we conclude Hilchos Talmud Torah. God willing, to be continued. Wow.